My cheating husband has a child with another woman and wants us to be one big family, only I refuse for that to be my future. I found out months ago that my husband had cheated on me, and his excuse was that he was tired of only being intimate with me in order to have a kid, even though he's the one that wants one. We talked through it, and after a while I decided to forgive him as he promised it wouldn't happen again. I've had multiple treatments since then so I can get pregnant, and now that I am, it has only gone downhill from there. I have been struggling with hemorrhages and told my birth would be incredibly high risk. My husband has cared about none of this and has only pushed himself further away from me since the pregnancy announcement. For a while now I have been caring for his sick mother, who has hip surgery and is in almost constant pain. He has been making my life extremely difficult. He'll take our one car just to go out bar hopping or whatever with his friends and leave me stranded at his mother's. He claims he needs the car more than me and will just drop me off at her place and disappear for hours. A few days ago, his mom tried going to the bathroom on her own, and she slipped and hurt herself. I tried calling my husband as we had no transportation and his mother doesn't have insurance, so I didn't want to call an ambulance, but of course he didn't pick up. I ended up getting a neighbor to help us by driving us both to the nearest hospital. She ended up needing to be admitted, and hours had gone by with no word from my husband. Eventually, my brother-in-law showed up to check on his mom and make sure everything was okay. I asked if he knew where my husband was because I was getting worried. He avoided eye contact and said it wasn't for him to say. I was confused, and I asked him to tell me if he knew something. That's when he came clean and told me my husband was at his other kid's gender reveal party. I was stunned and just looked at him like he was crazy. He went on to explain that when my husband cheated on me a few months ago, the woman ended up getting pregnant. Apparently, my husband has been providing for her, and they were doing a gender reveal party today to celebrate everything. He told me that his entire family knew, including his mother, and they had been keeping it from me. So I didn't freak out. I was furious. I couldn't believe that I had been practically killing myself taking care of a woman who kept this big of a secret from me that I was carrying my husband's child that was literally killing me, all because he told me he wanted a kid more than anything in the world. I was disgusted and called for an Uber to take me home. When my husband finally got home, I expected him to be apologizing to me, and I was prepared to reject all of it. Only instead, he came storming and furious, accusing me of abandoning his mother in her time of need. I asked what the hell he was talking about. Apparently his brother had to leave earlier and just assumed I was still around, so he left, and their mother was left all alone in the hospital. Asked him if his brother happened to mention a conversation we had at the hospital. He admitted that he did, but he didn't expect me to take my anger out on his poor, defenseless mother, that I was a horrible person for abandoning her, and that I had no right to be acting so petty. I told him he had no right to not tell me he had another kid with another woman. He said he couldn't stand to look at me and said we would discuss it in the morning, then went to bed. I couldn't believe anything that was happening and got angry all over again. I packed a bag and took an Uber to my sister's house. I told her everything, and she let me stay over and promised she would have my back no matter what. The next day, my husband kept calling and calling, demanding that I contact him so we could have a very important conversation. I agreed to meet at a restaurant near our house as I didn't want him to know I was staying with my sister, who as soon as he sat down, he started talking about how grateful he was to have two amazing women that loved him, both pregnant with his children, and that he couldn't stand to leave his other child out in the cold. He told me he decided it would be best if we became a polygyny household. That way we could all be one big happy family. I just laughed in his face. I told him I wasn't going to encourage his cheating and just be okay, welcoming his mistress and her son into my home. He said it was his home too, and he had every right to bring home whomever he wanted. I told him he was crazy and I wasn't okay with his plan in the slightest. He told me I'd better learn to be okay with it, as this was something he had decided for me. I told him no and got up to leave. He grabbed my arm and yanked me down. He told me I had better not defy him or I'd come to regret it. I wrestled my arm away from him and tried to leave the restaurant when he slammed me against a table, hitting my stomach. I got the wind knocked out of me, and thankfully some good Samaritans stepped in to force him off of me. Two guys walked me outside to wait for my Uber, while another detained my husband inside the restaurant so I could leave. As soon as I got to my sister's place, I started crying and she just held me. I told her I hated him and I couldn't stand to be pregnant anymore, that I didn't want to have a baby in the first place, and now I was stuck with something inside me that could lead to my death. All for a man who cheated and lied and was threatening my safety. She suggested that I go to the doctors and see if I was still able to get an abortion, as the pregnancy would qualify for an emergency because of my hemorrhages. I took her advice and my doctor said it was possible. I decided to go through with it, and I planned to tell my husband and his entire family that I lost the baby because he slammed me into a table. I'd like to see if they still support him after learning that. I needed to organize my thoughts before taking action. Everything felt like a blur, but the anger and disgust I felt were as clear as day. I spent the following days at my sister's house, trying to regain some sense of control over my life. Every call he made, every message he sent, only fueled my disdain. He insisted we needed to talk, but I knew there was nothing he could say to justify what he had done. When the moment arrived, I decided it was time to act. I invited his entire family to dinner at a neutral restaurant. I sent polite messages, making it seem like I wanted to resolve the conflicts and that it was important to have everyone together. My sister thought I was losing my mind, but I reassured her that I knew exactly what I was doing. On the set night, I calmly got ready, choosing an outfit that exuded confidence. My heart was racing, not out of fear, but in anticipation of finally turning the tables. When I arrived at the restaurant, he was already there with his parents, brother, and even the mistress, who looked uncomfortable. She was visibly pregnant, and seeing her made my stomach churn, but I took a deep breath. This wasn't about her, it was about him. I greeted everyone with a fake smile and sat at the head of the table, strategically positioned to control the situation. As soon as everyone ordered their drinks, I stood up and lightly tapped my glass with a spoon, drawing their attention. Before we start, I'd like to thank you all for coming. I think we can all agree that it's time to lay everything out on the table, don't you? He looked suspicious, but tried to maintain a calm facade. I began by talking about how I felt abandoned during the pregnancy and how I had been taking care of his mother while he was absent. My voice was controlled, but every word carried calculated weight. Then, without warning, I dropped the bomb. I lost the baby. I paused, letting the words sink in. And do you know why? Because the man I was supposed to call my husband slammed me against a table. The silence was deafening. I could see the shocked faces, the wide eyes of his mother, and the tense expressions of the others. He tried to interrupt, but I raised my hand. I'm not done. This wasn't an isolated incident. It was the culmination of months of betrayal, abandonment, and lies. And now, he wants to turn this into a polygamous household where we all pretend everything is fine while he continues to live his life as he pleases. His mother started crying, and his brother tried to intervene. But I continued. You all knew. Every single one of you knew about his child with another woman, about the affair, and yet you let me care for her, ignoring everything I was going through. You have no idea what it cost me. He tried to defend himself, saying I was exaggerating, that losing the baby was an accident, but I was ready for that. I pulled out an envelope containing the doctor's documents confirming my health condition and the risks the pregnancy posed. I handed it to his mother, who turned pale as she read. It's all here. Proof that he knew the risks and still treated me like garbage. This is the man you're defending. The mistress tried to say something, but I cut her off with a look. You're as much a victim as I was. He used you just like he used me. The difference is now you know who he really is. He was red with rage, but couldn't do anything. I calmly stood up, grabbed my bag, and left them all there, shocked and silent. Before leaving, I looked directly at him. This is just the beginning. Enjoy it while you can, because I won't stop until you pay for everything. I returned to my sister's house that night, feeling a mix of relief and determination. I knew the battle was far from over. He still had allies, and I would need to be smart to face him. But for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was in control again. As I looked out at the city through the window, I thought of all the ways to expose more of his lies, destroy the illusions he had built, and ensure that no one else would fall victim to him. This was far from over. He still didn't know who he was messing with. After that night at the restaurant, I returned to my sister's house with a clear plan. I had already started the game, but I knew there was still much to do to ensure he paid for everything. My sister, though worried, supported me in every decision. It was time to take this to the end without looking back. The next day, I began preparing my next move. I called a lawyer and explained the situation in detail. He was horrified by what he heard, especially about the physical and emotional abuse I endured, and assured me we had more than enough material to build a solid divorce case. The goal wasn't just to protect my future, but to ensure he didn't walk away unscathed. While the legal process began, I decided it was time to confront his family directly. They thought they could continue ignoring the chaos he had caused, but I wouldn't allow it. One afternoon, while he was out, probably with his mistress, I went to his mother's house, bringing my sister along as a witness. I knew she wouldn't be able to deny the facts with someone else present. When we arrived, his mother was sitting in the living room with his brother and father. The atmosphere turned tense the moment I walked in. His mother tried to start with that fake sympathy she always used, but I cut her off. "Don't worry, I'm not here to pretend everything's fine. I'm here to set things straight. You knew everything, didn't you? You knew about the affair, the child, and yet you let me take care of you, using me like some kind of emotional maid." She went pale and started stammering, but I continued. "Don't come at me with excuses. You knew what he was doing, and you still chose to cover for him. What was your excuse? That he's your son? That you didn't want to see the family fall apart? Well, guess what? It already has. And you had a hand in it." His brother tried to intervene, saying it wasn't fair to blame his mother, but my sister immediately jumped in. "Not fair? And what was fair to my sister? You all stood by while she was lied to, manipulated, and used. What kind of family does that?" His father, who had been silent until then, finally spoke. "It wasn't our intention to hurt you. We just wanted to protect the grandchild you were expecting." I laughed, but it was a bitter laugh. "Protect? You didn't protect anyone but him. And guess what? There's no grandchild anymore. I lost the baby, and he's the reason why." He slammed me against a table during an argument. "Do you still think he's someone worth protecting?" His mother started crying, but I had no empathy left to offer. This wasn't about her. It was about the weight I carried alone while everyone pretended everything was fine. I continued. "I'm divorcing him. I'm going to expose everything he did, every lie, every betrayal, every act of violence. You all have a choice. Keep pretending he's a good man or accept the truth and do something decent for once in your lives." I walked out without waiting for an answer. They could deal with their guilt however they wanted. That was no longer my problem. In the following days, things began moving quickly. My lawyer secured a restraining order against him, preventing him from coming near me or my sister. Additionally, we filed a divorce petition that included charges of abuse and emotional damages. But that wasn't all. I decided it was time to expose who he truly was to the rest of the world. I shared my story on social media, including details, without names, about how I had been betrayed, manipulated, and abused. The response was overwhelming. People who knew him began connecting the dots, and the story spread like wildfire. He, of course, tried to fight back. He claimed I was making everything up to ruin him, but the evidence was on my side. Text messages, photos, medical records, everything proved who he really was. The final blow came when the mistress also decided to walk away from him after realizing she was being used just like I had been. She publicly confirmed that he had lied to her about the situation and even about our marriage. When the dust finally began to settle, he was completely isolated. His family didn't come out unscathed either. His mother became seen as an enabler, someone who had covered up her son's actions, and his brother faced criticism for standing by and doing nothing. They tried to make amends with me, but I rejected every attempt at reconciliation. In court, the divorce was a spectacle. He tried to argue that I was to blame, that I was emotionally unstable, but my lawyer dismantled every lie with the evidence we had. In the end, the judge ruled in my favor, granting me not only the divorce, but also substantial financial compensation for the harm he caused me. When I walked out of the courthouse that day, I felt a massive weight lift off my shoulders. He was ruined financially, emotionally, and socially. He no longer had a family to support his lies, nor a reputation to hide his true face. As for me, I finally felt free. With the compensation money, I started a new life far from that city and everyone who had been part of that nightmare. My sister came with me, and together we started something new. I knew there were still wounds to heal, but for the first time in a long time, I could breathe. As for him, I heard rumors that he tried to start over, but his reputation preceded him. No one trusted him, and everyone who knew his story avoided him. It was a fitting end for someone who built his life on lies. I looked out the window of my new home, thinking about everything I had been through. There was still a long road ahead, but I was ready. He thought he could destroy me, but he didn't know he had awakened something in me, a strength he would never understand. And if he or anyone in his family ever thought about trying something again, I knew exactly how to respond.
My brother said that if I disappeared, no one in the family would even notice. So I disappeared. But I took all the money from the accounts with me. Before continuing the story, let us know in the comments which city you're watching from. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell so you won't miss more stories, and leave your like on the video. I learned I was different when I was 7. Not the kind of different you celebrate, the kind that makes you invisible in your own home. My parents adopted me when they couldn't have children. For 3 years, I was enough. Then my mother got pregnant, and suddenly I became the practice run, the trial version they'd tolerate until the real thing arrived. My brother Kyle came home from the hospital, and I watched my mother's face transform into something I'd never seen before. Pure, uncomplicated love. The kind she'd never quite managed with me, though I'd spent years trying to earn it. I told myself I was imagining things. Kids are dramatic, right? But children notice everything, especially the things adults think they're hiding. When Kyle learned to walk, my parents threw a party. When I'd done the same, there were a few photos, quickly filed away. His first words were recorded, replayed, celebrated. Mine existed somewhere in a baby book my mother rarely opened. By the time I was 10, the pattern was unmistakable. Kyle got the new clothes. I got hand-me-downs from cousins. His birthday parties had themes and decorations. Mine were quiet family dinners, if remembered at all. When he brought home a B, my parents celebrated his effort. When I brought home straight A's, I got a nod and a reminder not to get cocky. I learned to make myself useful. If I couldn't be loved, maybe I could be needed. I helped with dinner, cleaned without being asked, watched Kyle when they wanted alone time. I became the responsible one, the easy one, the one who didn't require much attention. My mother would sometimes pat my shoulder absently and say, "You're such a good girl," in the same tone she'd use to praise the dishwasher for running quietly. Functional. Appreciated for not causing problems. Kyle grew up knowing he was wanted. I grew up knowing I was kept. The difference showed in everything. He learned he could make mistakes and still be cherished. I learned that mistakes proved their doubts about me were justified. He developed confidence. I developed hypervigilance. I remember one particular evening when I was 12. I'd spent weeks preparing for the school science fair, staying up late to perfect my project on renewable energy. I won first place. When I came home with the blue ribbon, practically vibrating with excitement, my mother glanced up from helping Kyle with his homework. "That's nice, sweetie," she said, already turning back to my brother. "Kyle, remember, the answer is 7, not 6. You're so close." I stood there holding my ribbon, feeling it grow heavier in my hand. Kyle looked at me with something like pity. Even at 9, he could see what I refused to acknowledge. The ribbon went into a drawer. Kyle's honorable mention from the spelling bee went on the refrigerator for 6 months. I started working at 15, telling them I wanted to save for college. Really, I just wanted something that was mine. Money I'd earned, that couldn't be taken away or redistributed to the favorite child. My parents seemed relieved. One less expense to worry about. By 16, I was paying for my own clothes, school supplies, even my phone bill. Kyle still got everything handed to him. When I pointed this out once, my father said I was more capable and should be proud of my independence. Translation: they didn't want to spend money on me when they could spend it on him. I watched my parents attend every single one of Kyle's baseball games, cheering from the stands with painted faces and homemade signs. When I made the honor roll 4 years straight, They forgot to come to the awards ceremony twice. You understand, right? My mother said when I finally asked why they missed the second one. Kyle had a game that night. And you've won before, so we didn't think you'd mind. I minded. I just learned not to show it. My father worked in insurance. My mother as a part-time office manager. They weren't wealthy, but they weren't struggling either. There was money for Kyle's expensive baseball equipment, for his gaming system, for the laptop he wanted. When I asked for help buying a used car so I could get to work more easily, they suggested I save up a bit more first. I saved for 18 months while taking 2 buses to my restaurant job. Kyle got a car for his 16th birthday. I told myself it would get better when I moved out. That distance would make them miss me, see my value. I held on to that hope like a life raft, even as I felt myself drowning in their indifference. I was wrong, of course, but I wouldn't learn that for several more years. Some patterns don't break. They just become more obvious. College was my escape route, or so I thought. I worked 3 jobs to put myself through state university while living in a cramped apartment with 2 roommates. Every dollar I earned went toward tuition, books, and rent. I ate ramen more nights than I care to remember, studied in the library until closing because it was warmer than our apartment in winter, and wore the same 3 outfits in rotation. But it was mine. My struggle, my achievement. Kyle went to the same university 2 years later. My parents paid his full tuition, his housing in a nice apartment near campus, his meal plan, even his spring break trips to Cancun and Miami. When I asked why they couldn't have helped me even a little, my father shifted uncomfortably and said they hadn't been in a position to help back then. That was a lie. I'd seen the bank statements accidentally left on the kitchen counter during my last visit home. They'd had the money. They just hadn't wanted to spend it on me. The betrayal of that knowledge sat in my chest like a stone. I graduated with a degree in accounting and a 3.8 GPA. My parents came to the ceremony but left early to avoid traffic. Kyle graduated with a 2.5 and a communications degree he'd barely worked for. They threw him a party at Riverside Hall, invited the entire extended family, gave speeches about how proud they were of their son, their baby boy who'd worked so hard. I got a card with $50 in it and a text that said, "Sorry we couldn't stay longer at your graduation. So proud of you." The contrast was almost funny. Almost. I threw myself into my career with the same intensity I'd approached everything else. If I couldn't earn their love, I'd earn success. Within 3 years, I was working for a mid-sized firm in the city, managing multiple accounts, building a reputation for reliability and precision. I was good at what I did. Really good. My boss told me I had a real future there. Kyle bounced between entry-level marketing jobs, never lasting more than 8 months anywhere. He'd complain about demanding bosses, unreasonable expectations, office politics. The truth was simpler. He'd never learned to work hard because he'd never had to. Every job expected basic things, showing up on time, meeting deadlines, being professional, things that felt impossible to him. They just don't appreciate creative people, he'd tell our parents over dinner. They'd nod sympathetically while I sat there, invisible as always, thinking about the 80-hour weeks I'd pulled to make senior accountant by 28. I bought my first condo when I was 26. Small, but mine. 1 bedroom in a decent neighborhood, with a mortgage I could actually afford. I spent weeks picking out furniture from discount stores, painting the walls myself, making it feel like home. I was so proud the day I got the keys. I called my parents to share the news. "That's wonderful, honey," my mother said, her voice distracted. "Listen, is this a good time? Kyle is here and needs to talk to us about something." I could hear him in the background, his voice tight with frustration about his latest job drama. She hung up after less than 2 minutes. I stood in my empty living room, phone in hand, feeling that familiar ache of being less important than whatever crisis Kyle was manufacturing that week. Kyle still lived at home in his childhood bedroom at 24 years old. Rent-free, bills paid, meals cooked. The pattern continued through our late 20s. I dated, had relationships that didn't work out, learned about myself through therapy I paid for with my own insurance. Kyle dated too, but every girlfriend eventually left him. He couldn't understand why. After all, women should appreciate a guy who was honest and told it like it is. He never considered that his honesty was often just cruelty. His directness just selfishness wrapped in a prettier package. By my late 20s, I was making good money. Not wealthy, but comfortable. Senior accountant at a growing firm, respected by my colleagues, trusted by clients. I had a savings account, a retirement plan, a life I'd built entirely on my own. I took quiet pride in that, even if no one in my family seemed to notice or care. Kyle, at 26, had just been fired from his 4th job in 3 years. this time for attendance issues. He'd been showing up late, taking long lunches, calling in sick to play video games with his friends online. My mother called me in tears, as if someone had died. "He's going through a hard time," she said, her voice breaking. "The job market is so difficult right now. He just needs some support while he figures things out." She didn't ask about my life, didn't ask how I was doing, if I was happy, if I needed anything. It had been months since we'd had a real conversation that wasn't about Kyle's problems or my parents' concerns about him. I should have seen it coming, should have recognized the setup. But some part of me, that little girl still desperate for their approval, wanted to believe this might be different. "He's family," my father said when he called a week later. "Family helps each other." I'd been helping myself for over a decade. I'd been family all along. They just never noticed. The call came on a Tuesday evening. I was making dinner in my condo, finally having a quiet night after a brutal week at work, when my phone rang. My father's name flashed on the screen. "We need to talk about Kyle," he said without preamble. Of course. It was always about Kyle. He lost his job. My father continued. The company downsized. That was the official story. I later learned the truth from a mutual friend. Kyle had been caught sleeping at his desk twice, missed an important client presentation because he'd stayed up gaming until 4 a.m., and had been generally unreliable for months. They hadn't downsized. They'd cut him loose. "He's moving back home," my mother added. I hadn't realized she was on the call too. Just temporarily, while he finds something new. Temporarily. Kyle had never left home. Not really. He'd tried living on his own once, for about 4 months, before the responsibility of paying rent and utilities became too much. My parents had welcomed him back with open arms, just like they always did. "That's tough," I said, stirring my pasta. "I'm sure he'll find something soon." There was a pause. The kind of pause that meant they wanted something. "The thing is," my mother began, "we've been covering a lot of his expenses. The car insurance, his phone, his student loans. And now with him not working," my hand tightened on the wooden spoon. I knew where this was going. "We're stretched a bit thin," my father admitted. "I'm retiring in a few years, and we need to be more careful with money." The irony was staggering. They'd spent my entire childhood and young adulthood pouring money into Kyle, while I scrambled for scraps. Now they were stretched thin. "We were hoping," my mother said, her voice taking on that particular tone, guilt-inducing, slightly wounded, "that maybe you could help out, just until Kyle gets back on his feet." I stared at my dinner, watching the steam rise from the pot. Part of me wanted to laugh, part of me wanted to scream, but mostly I felt that old familiar ache, that desperate hope that maybe if I helped, maybe if I proved myself useful enough, they'd finally see me. "What kind of help?" I asked, hating myself for even considering it. "Nothing major," my father said quickly. "Maybe contribute to some of the household expenses, just for a few months?" A few months turned into 6, then a year, then 2 years. At first, it was small amounts. 200 here for groceries, 300 there for the electric bill. My parents thanked me, awkwardly but genuinely. Kyle said nothing, but I told myself he was embarrassed, that his pride was wounded. I wanted to believe there was something redeemable in his silence. Then my father actually did retire, and their income shrank. My contributions grew. 500 for the mortgage 1 month, 800 the next. They started calling more frequently, always with another urgent expense. The water heater broke. The car needed new tires. The property tax was due. I set up a joint account that I funded monthly. $1,500, like clockwork. It was supposed to be for necessities, groceries, utilities, basic household expenses. Instead, I watched the statements show charges at expensive restaurants, a new gaming computer for Kyle, premium cable packages, designer clothes. When I brought it up gently, suggesting we should budget more carefully, my mother got defensive. "We're not children," she said, hurt in her voice. "We know how to manage money." Except they didn't. They'd managed to spend decades spoiling Kyle and were now extending that pattern with my money. Kyle finally got another job. Part-time, low-paying, but something. He worked at a sporting goods store 20 hours a week. It barely covered his car insurance and phone bill. He made no moves to contribute to the household or look for full-time work. "He's trying," my mother insisted when I asked why he wasn't looking for something with more hours. "You know how hard the job market is." I worked 50 hours a week. I'd built a career from nothing. I'd never had the luxury of trying being good enough. But still, I kept paying. Because sometimes, very occasionally, my mother would text me something sweet. "Thank you for being so responsible." Or my father would say, I don't know what we'd do without you. Those crumbs of acknowledgement fed something in me I didn't want to examine too closely. That desperate little girl, still hoping that maybe this time they'd finally love her the way they loved Kyle. My therapist asked me once why I kept doing it, why I kept funding a family that had never really treated me like I belonged. I didn't have a good answer. Just a question that had haunted me my entire life. What else could I do to make them love me? I was 31 years old, funding my parents' retirement and my brother's extended adolescence, and I was still invisible, except to their bank account. The account became my second mortgage, $1,500 a month every month for 2 years. I watched it drain away faster than I could fill it, funding a lifestyle my parents couldn't afford and Kyle refused to work for. I started tracking the expenses obsessively. Maybe if I understood where the money went, I could convince them to be more careful. The spreadsheet grew longer each month. Premium streaming services, all of them. Restaurants 3-4 times a week. A gym membership Kyle never used. New clothes, new electronics, subscription boxes for things they didn't need. My own budget tightened in response. I stopped eating out, canceled my own subscriptions, put off replacing my aging car. The irony wasn't lost on me. I was sacrificing so my family could indulge. But there were moments that made it bearable. Small moments when I felt seen. My mother called one afternoon, just to chat. Not to ask for money, just to talk. She told me about her garden, asked about my work. For 20 minutes, I felt like her daughter instead of her ATM. When we hung up, I felt lighter than I had in months. My father texted me after I helped with an unexpectedly large repair bill. "You're really saving us here. I know I don't say it enough, but we appreciate you." Kyle, surprisingly, showed brief flashes of something like awareness. Once, when I visited for Sunday dinner, he pulled me aside. "This is weird, right?" he said, not quite meeting my eyes. "You paying for everything." My heart jumped. Was he finally seeing it? Finally understanding? "I mean, I'm gonna get a better job soon," he continued quickly. "Full-time, benefits, the whole thing. Then I can help out too." It never materialized, of course. The job search was always active, the interviews always promising, but nothing ever came through. I wondered sometimes if he was even trying. 3 months later, I reviewed the account statement over my morning coffee. They'd gone over budget by $800. Again, I closed my eyes and counted to 10 before calling my mother. "We need to talk about the spending," I said, trying to keep my voice level. "What spending?" She sounded genuinely confused. "The account is supposed to be for necessities, groceries, utilities, insurance, but you're spending on restaurants, shopping, things that aren't essential." "We're not being irresponsible," she said, her tone shifting to defensive. "We're just living. We've been careful our whole lives. Can't we enjoy our retirement a little? With my money?" The words came out sharper than I intended. There was silence on the other end. "I didn't realize we were such a burden to you," my mother said quietly, and I felt that familiar stab of guilt. "That's not what I meant. We'll be more careful," she said, voice tight. "I have to go." She hung up. I sat there holding my phone, feeling like I'd somehow become the villain in a story where I was the one being used. 2 weeks later, Kyle added me on a group chat with my parents. It was a meme about choosing beggars, people who ask for help then complain about how they get it. The message was clear. I was being ungrateful for the privilege of funding their lifestyle. I didn't respond. What could I say? The spending didn't decrease. If anything, it got worse. A weekend trip to the coast, new furniture for the living room. Kyle's car needed work. Expensive work that could have waited, but they authorized immediately. I increased my contribution to $2,000 a month. It wasn't sustainable, but what else could I do? Let them lose the house? Watch them struggle? My savings account stopped growing, then started shrinking. I was 33 years old, making decent money, and I was going backwards financially. But I told myself it was worth it. Because sometimes, just sometimes, my mother would say she was proud of me. My father would acknowledge how much I helped. Those moments, rare and precious, kept me going. Kyle started calling me directly when he needed something. Not for the household, but for him. Concert tickets, a new laptop, payments on credit cards he'd maxed out. "Come on," he'd say when I hesitated. "You're already helping everyone else. What's a few hundred more?" Sometimes I said yes, sometimes I said no. Either way, I felt like I was failing someone, either myself or them. There was no winning. I became the family bank, and banks don't get gratitude. They get used. I decided to host Christmas that year. It was a terrible idea driven by hope I should have abandoned years ago. My therapist would later ask me what I was trying to prove. I told her I didn't know, but that was a lie. I knew exactly what I was doing. I was making one final attempt to earn what should have been freely given. My family's love and recognition. I spent $3,000 I couldn't afford. I rented a room at the Heritage Inn, a beautiful historic venue with exposed brick and twinkling lights. I hired a caterer who did farm-to-table cuisine. There was a bartender, a pianist, custom decorations in gold and burgundy. I even had personalized gifts for everyone, expensive ones that I'd agonized over for weeks. My parents arrived first. My mother's eyes widened when she walked in. "Oh, honey," she said, and for a moment she looked at me the way I'd always wanted, with wonder, with pride. "This is beautiful. You did all this?" "I wanted it to be special," I said, my heart hammering. She squeezed my hand. "It is. It really is." That small gesture, that tiny acknowledgement, made everything feel worth it. This was it. This was the moment things would change. Kyle arrived 20 minutes late with his girlfriend, a quiet woman named Tessa who seemed uncomfortable in the fancy setting. Various aunts, uncles, and cousins trickled in. Everyone was impressed. People kept congratulating me on the venue, the food, the atmosphere. For the first time in my life, I was the center of positive attention in my family. It felt intoxicating. Dinner was perfect. The food was excellent. The wine flowing. Conversation warm. My mother kept looking around with this pleased expression. My father told a story about my childhood that was actually flattering. A rarity. Kyle was quiet, but I told myself he was just tired from work. Then came time for the toast. My father stood, glass in hand, and thanked everyone for coming. He talked about family, about traditions, about how grateful he and my mother were for another year together. Standard holiday stuff. Then Kyle stood up. "I want to add something," he said, and I felt a flutter of unease. Something in his expression was off, that hint of meanness he sometimes got when he'd been drinking. "It's great we're all here," Kyle continued, "in this fancy place that someone spent a fortune on." He gestured around the room, smiling, but his eyes were hard. "Really went all out, didn't you?" I felt my face flush. "I just wanted—" No, it's impressive," he cut me off. "Must be nice, having all that disposable income. Some of us have to actually work for a living instead of just crunching numbers all day." There were a few uncomfortable laughs. I couldn't tell if people thought he was joking. "Kyle?" my mother said quietly. "What?" "I'm giving a toast." His voice got louder. "To my sister, who's so generous with her money, who makes sure we all know exactly how generous she is. Must feel good, playing the hero." The room had gone silent. Everyone was staring. "I mean, let's be honest," Kyle continued, warming to his subject now. "If she disappeared tomorrow, like, just didn't show up to work, didn't answer her phone for a week, would anyone actually notice? Besides the accountants wondering where she is?" Someone gasped. I couldn't tell who. "Would anyone miss her?" Kyle pressed. "Really? Or would we all just kind of go on with our lives?" "That's enough," my father said, but there was no real force behind it. Kyle raised his glass higher. "I bet nobody would even realize she was gone for at least a week. Maybe longer. That's how forgettable she is. So here's to—" "Stop," I whispered, but my voice came out too quiet to carry. "Here's to my sister. The human checkbook." Kyle finished his toast. A few people laughed. Nervous laughs, awkward laughs, but laughs nonetheless. My mother's face was tight with discomfort, but she didn't defend me. My father looked at his plate. My uncle actually chuckled like it was a joke. Kyle sat down, looking pleased with himself. Tessa whispered something urgent to him, pulling his arm, but he shrugged her off. I stood there, in this beautiful room I'd paid for, at this party I'd organized, feeling smaller than I ever had in my life. The pianist was still playing softly in the corner. The lights still twinkled, but everything felt hollow. My hands were shaking. My face burned. 33 years of invisible ached in my chest. "Actually," I heard myself say, my voice stronger than I felt, "that's an interesting theory." Kyle looked up, surprised I was speaking. "Disappear for a week and nobody notices," I continued. "Want to bet on it?" He laughed. "What?" "I'll do it. I'll disappear. Let's see if you're right." The room was silent again, but different this time. Uncertain. "Oh, come on," Kyle said, but he looked uncomfortable now. "I was just what? Joking?" I smiled, but it felt wrong on my face. "Then there's no harm in testing it out, right? 1 week, no contact, let's see who notices." "Don't be dramatic," my mother said. "I'm not. I'm taking you up on your son's dare." I looked at each of them. 1 week. Starting now. I grabbed my coat and walked out of the Heritage Inn, leaving behind my family, my beautiful party, and the last shred of hope I'd been holding on to for 33 years. I sat in my car in the parking lot for 10 minutes. Engine running, hands gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles went white. Part of me expected someone to come after me, to apologize, to say Kyle had gone too far. Nobody came. Through the venue windows, I could see the party continuing. People were talking, drinking, laughing. Life went on without me in the room, just like it always had. I drove home in a daze. The streets were decorated with Christmas lights, families visible through windows, warm and together. I felt like a ghost moving through a world I didn't belong to. Inside my condo, I stood in the dark living room and let myself cry. Not the pretty kind of crying from movies. The ugly, choking kind that comes from a lifetime of swallowed hurt finally breaking free. When I could breathe again, I opened my laptop. The joint account stared back at me from the screen. $2,000 I'd deposited 3 days ago. Money for January's expenses. Money they'd probably already mentally allocated to whatever they wanted. My finger hovered over the mouse. This was crazy, right? I was overreacting. Kyle was drunk, he'd apologize tomorrow. My mother would call and smooth things over. My father would say something about family sticking together despite disagreements. I refreshed my email. Nothing. Checked my phone. No missed calls. No texts saying, "Are you okay?" or "That was awful," or "Come back." Just a group text from Kyle. Drama queen much? Several family members had liked it. Something cold settled in my chest. Not anger exactly, something clearer, sharper. Resignation, maybe. Or clarity. I'd spent 33 years trying to earn a place in my family. I'd worked harder, achieved more, sacrificed more than Kyle ever had. I'd paid their bills, funded their lifestyle, made myself indispensable. And tonight, I'd thrown them a beautiful party trying to buy what I couldn't earn. For what? So my brother could publicly humiliate me? So my parents could sit there in silence? So my extended family could laugh? I thought about what Kyle had said. Would anyone notice if I disappeared? My therapist's voice echoed in my head from our last session. You keep waiting for them to change. But the only person you can change is yourself. I opened my banking app. The joint account sat there, mocking me with its balance. I stared at it for a long moment. Years of conditioning screamed at me to stop, to not be impulsive, to think about the consequences. But what consequences? That they'd be angry? They were already indifferent. That they'd struggle? They'd struggled before I helped. And they'd somehow survived. That I'd feel guilty. I already felt guilty all the time. Guilty for not doing enough. For asking questions about spending. For existing as an inconvenience. I created a new account. Transferred every penny from the joint account into it. Then I removed myself from the joint account entirely. Then I went further. I logged into my automatic payment system and canceled the monthly transfer. Went through every shared bill I'd somehow ended up on over the years. Kyle's car insurance, my parents' phone plan, subscriptions, and removed my payment information. My hands shook the entire time, but I didn't stop. I drafted a text to the family group chat. Taking you up on that disappearing act. 1 week, no contact. Let's see who notices. I deleted it. Too dramatic. Instead, I simply turned off my phone and put it in a drawer. The silence in my apartment was deafening. No phone notifications, no emails, no demands for attention or money or explanations. Just me, alone, with the choice I'd made. I felt terrified, guilty, relieved, exhilarated, like I'd just jumped off a cliff and wasn't sure if I'd hit water or rocks. I pulled out my laptop and opened a document. Started writing down everything, every slight, every comparison, every time I'd been made to feel less than. The science fair ribbon in the drawer, the missed award ceremonies, the car I'd saved for while Kyle got one as a gift, the years of funding their lives while mine stagnated. Writing it down made it real, made it impossible to minimize or excuse, made it impossible to pretend things weren't as bad as they were. By 3 a.m., I had 10 pages. I finally fell asleep on my couch, laptop still open, feeling more terrified and more free than I'd ever been in my life. Tomorrow would bring consequences. But tonight, for the first time ever, I'd chosen myself. The world didn't end. The sky didn't fall. I just existed, in my own space, owing nothing to anyone. It felt like breathing after decades underwater. I woke up the next morning with my heart racing, certain I'd made a terrible mistake. The impulse to check my phone was overwhelming. So strong, I actually walked to the drawer where I'd hidden it 3 times before stopping myself. What if my mother had called to apologize? What if something was wrong? What if they were worried? But I remembered that group text. Kyle's drama queen much? And the little thumbs up reactions from family members. I left the phone where it was. Instead, I made coffee and sat at my kitchen table with my laptop, staring at the bank account. The money I'd transferred sat there, real and final. I could still send it back, undo everything, pretend last night was just a dramatic gesture. My finger hovered over the keyboard. I thought about the spreadsheet I'd kept for 2 years. The thousands of dollars spent on restaurants while I ate meal prep on Sundays to save money. The new gaming computer while I drove a car with 150,000 miles. The vacation to the coast while I hadn't taken a vacation in 3 years. I thought about Kyle's words. Would anyone actually notice? I closed the laptop. The week stretched ahead of me like a test I wasn't sure I could pass. No contact meant no contact. No checking in, no explanations, no caving to guilt. 7 days to prove whether Kyle was right, whether I was truly invisible to my family unless I was useful. Day 1 was the hardest. Every hour felt like pulling against elastic that wanted to snap me back to familiar patterns. I cleaned my apartment obsessively, went to the gym, bought groceries for myself, real groceries, not just the cheapest options. I picked up expensive cheese without checking the price and felt simultaneously guilty and defiant. I lasted until noon before I pulled my phone out of the drawer just to look at it. Powered off, silent, it looked harmless. I could just turn it on for a second, just to make sure there were no emergencies. I put it back without turning it on. Day 2 was easier. I went to work and threw myself into a project I'd been putting off. My coworkers noticed something different about me. I was focused in a way I hadn't been in months, not distracted by family drama or financial stress. "You seem lighter," my colleague said at lunch. "Maybe," I said, and realized it was true. Day 3, I started to wonder if anyone had noticed yet. The bills would start coming due soon. The mortgage payment, the utilities, Kyle's car insurance. When would they realize the money wasn't there? Day 4, I almost caved. The guilt came in waves. What if my parents couldn't pay their bills? What if they were scared? What if my mother was crying? But then I remembered her face at the party. The way she'd looked uncomfortable but said nothing. The way she'd never once defended me from Kyle's lifetime of casual cruelty. The way family helps family only ever seemed to apply in one direction. I stayed strong. Day 5, something shifted. I wasn't just proving a point anymore. I was starting to enjoy the space, the silence, the lack of demands. I read a book I'd bought 6 months ago and never opened. Watched a movie without checking my phone every 10 minutes. Existed without being needed. Day 6, I started to realize this wasn't just a test for them. It was a test for me. Could I survive without their approval? Could I be enough for myself? Day 7 arrived like a finish line I was both eager and terrified to cross. I'd made it. 1 full week of silence. Of invisibility. Self-imposed this time. That evening, I finally turned on my phone. My hands shook as I waited for it to power up, imagining the flood of worried messages, the concerned voicemails, the panic I'd caused. The phone came to life. 12 notifications. My heart sank and soared simultaneously. 12 wasn't a lot for 7 days, but it was something. Maybe they had noticed. Maybe Kyle had been wrong. I opened my messages. 3 were from my cell phone carrier about my bill. 2 were from my dentist about an upcoming appointment. 4 were promotional emails I'd somehow allowed to send text notifications. 1 was from my credit card about a payment posting. 2 were from my family. The first, from day 2, was from Kyle. "Hey, streaming service isn't working. Did you forget to pay it?" The second, from day 5, was from my mother. "Honey, something's wrong with the account. Can you check it?" Several bills bounced. That was it. 7 days of silence and 2 messages, both about money. Not, "Are you okay?" Not, "We're worried about you." Not, "Kyle was awful and we're sorry." Just, "Fix the money problem." I sat on my couch, phone in hand, and laughed. It came out harsh and bitter, but it was laugh nonetheless. Kyle had been right, just not in the way he'd meant. They had noticed I was gone. They'd noticed the money was gone. Me? I was still invisible. The difference was, now I could see it too. Kyle called 3 hours after I turned my phone back on. I stared at his name on the screen, watching it ring, feeling nothing but a strange calm. I answered. "Finally!" He exploded before I could say hello. Where the hell have you been? The streaming services are all canceled, and I had friends over last night. Do you know how embarrassing that was? Not, are you okay? Not we were worried. Just anger that I'd inconvenienced him. I've been here, I said quietly. Well, you need to fix the accounts. Like, now. I'm trying to watch something and… No. Silence. Then, what? No. I'm not fixing the accounts. Very funny. Look, I know I maybe went a little far at Christmas. A little far? My voice stayed level, which surprised me. You stood up in front of our entire family and said nobody would notice if I disappeared. You made a joke out of me. Oh my God, you're still on about that. It was a joke. Everyone knew it was a joke. Then why didn't anyone laugh until after you said it? Why did they laugh at me, Kyle? Because you're being sensitive. Jesus, you can't take a joke? It wasn't funny. Whatever. His tone shifted to irritation. Can you just fix the services? Mom and Dad are freaking out about bills too. Those aren't my bills to pay. What are you talking about? You've been paying them for 2 years. Exactly. 2 years of paying for everything while you lived rent-free, worked part-time, and contributed nothing. I contribute. I help around the house. You're 28 years old, Kyle, living at home, working 20 hours a week at a sporting goods store. That's not contributing. That's freeloading. I could hear his breathing, fast and angry. You know what? You've always been like this. Always acting like you're better than everyone because you have some boring office job. I'm not better than anyone. I'm just tired of being your ATM. You're seriously doing this? You're seriously cutting us off? I'm setting boundaries. Something I should have done years ago. This is bullshit. His voice cracked slightly. Anger or panic, I couldn't tell. Mom and Dad need that money. They're counting on you. They have retirement income. They have savings. Or they would if they hadn't spent it all on you. They'll figure it out. You're really going to do this to your family? The word family hit differently than it used to. Family was supposed to be about love, support, connection. All I'd ever gotten was obligation and usefulness. I'm doing this for myself, I said. You're being selfish. Maybe. Or maybe I'm finally done being everyone's backup plan. When Mom calls crying, that's on you. Kyle, I said, and my voice was steady in a way it had never been with him before. I'm not your bank anymore. I'm not Mom and Dad's retirement plan. I'm not the safety net you fall into every time you screw up. I'm done. You'll change your mind, he said. But there was something uncertain in his voice now. Something that hadn't been there before. I won't. We'll see. He hung up. I set my phone down and realized I was shaking. Not from fear or guilt, but from adrenaline. I'd said no. I'd actually said no, and meant it. The phone rang again. My mother this time. I let it go to voicemail. She called back immediately. Voicemail again. Then a text. Please call me. We need to talk about the account. Then another. I don't understand what's happening. Why would you do this? Then my father. Your mother is very upset. Call her. I turned my phone to silent and set it face down on the coffee table. Part of me wanted to call back, to explain, to make them understand. The old part, the part that had spent 33 years trying to earn love, that was never going to come. But the new part, the part that had spent a week alone and survived, knew better. They didn't want to understand. They wanted me to fold, to apologize, to restore their comfort at the expense of my own. For the first time in my life, I chose my own comfort instead. The phone kept lighting up with notifications I didn't read. I made dinner, a real dinner, not just something quick between obligations. I ate slowly, savoring it. That night, I slept better than I had in years. My mother called again on day 9. This time, I answered. Hi, I said, my voice neutral. Oh, thank God. She sounded relieved, exhausted. Honey, I've been trying to reach you for days. What's going on? Why did you close the account? I didn't close it. I just removed myself from it. But we need that money. The mortgage payment bounced. The electric company is threatening to shut off service. We don't understand what happened. What happened is I stopped paying your bills. But you've always… She stopped herself. This is about Christmas, isn't it? About what Kyle said? Finally, someone was acknowledging it. Partly, I said. He was drunk. He didn't mean it. You know how he gets when he drinks too much. He called you yesterday, didn't he? I'm sure he apologized. He didn't apologize. Mom, he yelled at me about the streaming services being canceled. Well, he's under a lot of stress. His job isn't going well and… I don't care about Kyle's stress, I interrupted. I care that he humiliated me in front of our entire family. And you said nothing. Dad said nothing. You both just sat there. We didn't want to make a scene. It was Christmas and what? It was fine for Kyle to make a scene, but not fine for you to defend your daughter? Silence. Then, that's not fair. What's not fair is that I've spent 2 years paying your bills. What's not fair is that I worked 3 jobs to put myself through college while you paid for everything for Kyle. What's not fair is that I've been treated like an afterthought my entire life, and the only time anyone notices me is when the money stops. That's not true. We love you. The words should have meant something. For years, I would have clung to them, analyzed them, treasured them. Now they felt empty. When's my birthday, Mom? What? My birthday. What day is it? Why are you asking me this? Because I want to see if you know. A long pause. June 20th? 23rd. Kyle's is April 14th. You've never once forgotten his. That's not the same thing. You're right, it's not. Because you've never forgotten his and you frequently forget mine. My voice cracked slightly. Do you know what I do for a living? My exact job title? You're an accountant. Senior financial analyst. I got promoted 8 months ago. I told you in an email. You never responded. We get a lot of emails, honey. And things have been so busy. Do you know where I went on vacation 3 years ago? The only vacation I've taken in 5 years? Silence. Portland. I sent you pictures. Kyle went to Cancun last year on spring break, and you still have photos from that trip on your fridge. Mine never made it out of your phone. Why are you doing this? Her voice was thick now. Tears or frustration, I couldn't tell. Why are you being so cruel? I'm not being cruel, Mom. I'm telling you the truth. For 33 years, I've been invisible in this family unless you needed something from me, and I'm done with it. We're your parents. You can't just abandon us. I'm not abandoning you. I'm stopping paying your bills. There's a difference. We can't afford the house without your help. Your father's retirement isn't enough, and with Kyle not working full-time, then Kyle needs to get a full-time job. Or you need to downsize. Or you need to budget better. Those are all options that don't involve me sacrificing my own financial security. This is so selfish. She was crying now. Really crying. We raised you. We gave you a home. You gave me the minimum required to not be reported to CPS, I said flatly. You gave Kyle a home. You gave Kyle love. You gave Kyle everything. I was just there. That's not true. We love you just as much. Don't, I said. And my voice was hard. Don't lie to me. Don't lie to yourself. We both know it's not true. We've always known it's not true. She was sobbing now. Part of me wanted to take it back, to comfort her, to make it better. That instinct ran deep, deeper than logic or self-preservation. But I'd spent 33 years managing everyone's emotions but my own. I have to go, I said. Please, please don't do this. We need you. You need my money. That's not the same thing. What are we supposed to do? Figure it out. The same way I've had to figure everything out my entire life. Please. I hung up, set the phone down, stared at my hands, which were shaking again. My mother had cried. She'd begged. And I'd still said no. The guilt was crushing. A physical weight on my chest. Years of conditioning screamed that I was a terrible daughter, a terrible person, that I should call back, apologize, fix it. But underneath the guilt was something else. Something quiet, but strong. Relief. I'd finally told the truth, and the world hadn't ended. My phone buzzed with a text from my mother. I'm sorry we weren't perfect parents, but we did our best. Doesn't that count for something? I turned the phone off completely. Their best had never been enough, and I was done pretending it was. My father called 3 weeks later. Not my mother, not Kyle. Him. That's how I knew things were serious. We'd never had the kind of relationship where we called each other just to chat. Our interactions were functional. Pleasant enough, but distant. He'd always deferred to my mother on emotional matters, content to be the quiet presence in the background. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity won. Hi, Dad. We need to talk. His voice was tight, controlled, the tone he used to use when I'd broken a rule as a kid. This has gone on long enough. What has? This tantrum. This punishment you're putting your mother through. Something cold settled in my stomach. Tantrum? You're angry about Christmas. I get it. Kyle crossed a line. But you don't punish the whole family for one person's mistake. One person's mistake that you did nothing to stop. What was I supposed to do? Make a scene in front of everyone? Yes! The word came out louder than I intended. Yes, Dad. You were supposed to defend me. You were supposed to tell Kyle he was out of line. You were supposed to act like you gave a damn that your son just humiliated your daughter in public. I talked to him afterward. Afterward doesn't matter. Don't you understand that? Defending me afterward in private where nobody sees, that's not actually defending me. That's just managing your own guilt. Silence on the line. I could hear him breathing, controlled and measured. We're going to lose the house, he said finally. My heart dropped. What? We're 3 months behind on the mortgage. The bank sent a notice. We have 60 days to catch up or they start foreclosure proceedings. The panic was immediate and visceral. Lose the house, my childhood home, the place where, despite everything, I had some good memories buried under the bad ones. How did it get that bad? I asked. You stopped paying into the account. We had to cover everything ourselves, and it's more than we can manage. You have retirement income, Social Security. Dad, the math doesn't work. You shouldn't be that far behind after 3 weeks. A pause. We had some other expenses. What expenses? That's not what expenses, Dad. Kyle needed help with some debt. Credit cards he'd run up. We had to help him or they were going to sue. I closed my eyes. How much? That's between us and Kyle. How much did you pay toward his credit card debt instead of your mortgage? $8,000. His voice was defensive now. He needed help. He's our son. I'm your daughter. You don't need help. You have a good job savings. You're fine on your own. Kyle struggles. He needs us. Kyle is 28 years old. He needs to face consequences for his actions, not get bailed out every time he screws up. You don't understand how hard it is for him. Stop, I was yelling now. Stop making excuses for him. Stop acting like he's some fragile thing that needs constant protection. He's not. He's a grown man who's never had to be responsible for anything because you keep rescuing him. So you're punishing him by punishing us? No. I'm setting boundaries that I should have set years ago. You chose to pay his credit cards instead of your mortgage. That's on you, not me. We're your parents. You're supposed to help family. I did help. For 2 years. And before that, I helped by never asking for anything. Never being a problem. Never requiring the time and money and attention you poured into Kyle. I helped by making myself invisible. That's not fair. You want to know what's not fair, Dad? I have $34,000 in my savings account. Do you know how much I'd have if I hadn't been funding your household for 2 years? Over $70,000. That's $36,000 I gave to this family. He was quiet. I could have bought a house. A real house, not a condo. I could have taken vacations. I could have had a life. Instead, I watched you spend my money on restaurants and new furniture and Kyle's gaming equipment while I ate cheap meals and drove a dying car. We didn't ask you to sacrifice. Yes, you did. Maybe not in those words, but every time you called with another emergency, every time you made me feel guilty for questioning the spending, every time you made it clear that Kyle needed help and I was capable of giving it, you asked. And I gave. And it was never enough. So that's it? His voice was hard now, angry. You're just going to let us lose everything. You're not going to lose everything. You're going to lose a house you can't afford. Then you'll downsize, budget properly, and live within your means. Your mother will be devastated. The guilt stabbed deep, but I held firm. Then she'll recover. People do. I never thought you could be this cold. The words hit like a slap. Cold, cruel, selfish. All the words they were using to describe me now that I'd stopped being useful. I'm not cold, Dad. I'm just done setting myself on fire to keep you warm. Don't call us again until you're ready to act like family. He hung up. I sat there, phone in hand, feeling like I'd been punched in the chest. They were losing the house, my childhood home, because of me. No, not because of me. Because they'd chosen to pay Kyle's credit card debt instead of their mortgage. Because they'd spent years living beyond their means. Because they'd expected me to fund their choices indefinitely. This wasn't my fault. I had to keep repeating it to make myself believe it. This wasn't my fault. I found out they lost the house through my aunt. Not from my parents, not from Kyle. From my mother's sister, who called me 6 weeks after my father's ultimatum. I can't believe you let this happen, she said without preamble. Hello to you too, I said. They're moving into a 2-bedroom apartment. Your parents. After 30 years in that house. Do you have any idea how humiliating this is for them? They couldn't afford the house. Because you abandoned them. I'd heard this so many times now the words barely landed. Abandoned. Selfish. Cold. Cruel. The family had decided on a narrative, and I was the villain. Where are they moving? I asked, ignoring the accusation. Riverside Gardens. That affordable complex near the highway. Your father is mortified. Your mother cries every day. Riverside Gardens. I knew it. Clean, safe, perfectly adequate. A significant downgrade from their house, but not the tragedy my aunt was making it sound like. And Kyle? I asked. A pause. What about him? Where's Kyle living? He's looking for his own place. He's not moving with them? The apartment only has 2 bedrooms. There's no space. I felt something crack in my chest. Not sadness. Something sharper. They'd lost their house, were moving to a smaller apartment, and Kyle still wasn't planning to contribute or help. He was just moving on. So let me get this straight, I said slowly. Mom and Dad lost the house. They're downsizing to an apartment. And Kyle, who has lived rent-free his entire adult life, who they paid $8,000 in credit card debt for, is getting his own place instead of helping them? He needs his independence. He's 28. He's had independence available to him this whole time. He chose not to take it. You don't understand how hard— Stop. Just stop. I'm not doing this anymore. I took a breath. How are they managing? Financially? Barely. Your uncle helped with the moving costs. I'm covering their security deposit. We're all pitching in because family helps family. The implication was clear. Everyone but me. That's good, I said. I'm glad they have support. You could still help, you know. It's not too late to fix this. There's nothing to fix. They made choices. Now they're living with the consequences. You're really going to let your parents struggle while you sit there with your comfortable life? My comfortable life. The one I'd built entirely on my own. The one I'd nearly bankrupted trying to fund theirs. Yes, I said simply. She hung up on me. Over the next few weeks, I heard through the grapevine how things were going. My parents had moved into the apartment. It was smaller, older, but functional. They were learning to budget properly for the first time in years. My father had taken a part-time consulting job to supplement their income. Kyle had moved into a studio apartment. Alone, for the first time in his life. According to my cousin, he was struggling hard. Couldn't figure out how to grocery shop efficiently. Complained constantly about having to clean. Had called my mother crying twice about feeling overwhelmed. My mother apparently still talked to him every day. Gave him advice, talked him through problems, reassured him he was doing great. She hadn't called me once. Part of me had expected her to reach out eventually, to apologize, or at least try to rebuild something. But weeks turned into months, and nothing. They'd made their choice. I'd been useful. And when I stopped being useful, I stopped being relevant. Kyle lasted 3 months before he quit his job at the sporting goods store. Too stressful, he told people. His boss was unreasonable. The hours were too demanding for 20 hours a week. Without income, he couldn't afford even his cheap studio. I heard he was couch surfing, staying with friends for a few days at a time. My parents couldn't take him in. The apartment lease specifically limited occupancy, and they couldn't risk eviction. For the first time in his life, Kyle had no safety net. I felt sorry for him. Not enough to help, but sorry nonetheless. He'd been enabled his whole life, set up to fail by parents who'd loved him too much to let him struggle. Now he was paying the price, but so were my parents. They'd spent decades prioritizing Kyle, and now that they needed him, he wasn't capable of stepping up. He'd never learned how. My uncle tried to take him in but kicked him out after 2 weeks when Kyle didn't contribute to groceries or household chores. My cousin lasted 5 days before telling Kyle he needed to find somewhere else. The family was learning what I'd known all along. Kyle couldn't function as an independent adult because he'd never been required to. And my parents were learning what it felt like to need help and not receive it. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt sad. Sad for what could have been. Sad for the family we might have had if they'd loved me like they loved Kyle. Sad for Kyle himself, who'd been ruined by the very love that was supposed to protect him. But I didn't feel guilty anymore. That was something. 6 months after Christmas, I was living a life I barely recognized. Not because it was dramatically different, but because it was mine. I started therapy twice a week. Real therapy, where I talked about adoption trauma, scapegoat children, and the ways families can damage people who love them. My therapist didn't tell me I'd done the right thing or the wrong thing. She helped me understand why I'd done it, and that was more valuable. My savings account was growing again. I'd started contributing to my 401k properly. I bought a new car, nothing fancy, but reliable and paid for in cash. These small financial victories felt enormous after years of watching my money disappear into someone else's life. I went on dates. Some good, some terrible, all interesting. I was learning who I was when I wasn't defined by my family's needs. Turned out I liked hiking. I was terrible at pottery but enjoyed trying. I could spend an entire Saturday reading without feeling guilty about not being productive. My phone rarely rang with family calls anymore. Most of my relatives had taken sides, and very few had chosen mine. That hurt less than I expected. Quality over quantity, my therapist said. The people who mattered understood, or at least respected my choices. My friend group expanded. People from work, from my hiking group, from random places. They knew me as just me, not as someone's daughter or sister, not as a bank or a safety net. Just a person with interests and boundaries and a life. I heard updates occasionally through the few relatives still speaking to me. My parents had adjusted to apartment living. It wasn't easy, but they were managing. My father's consulting work was going well. My mother had joined a community garden and seemed to be enjoying it. Kyle had finally found full-time work through a temp agency. Nothing glamorous, warehouse work, inventory management. But it was 40 hours a week with benefits. And he was apparently showing up consistently for the first time in his adult life. He'd gotten his own apartment again, a small one-bedroom he could barely afford. But it was his. I didn't reach out. Neither did they. Sometimes I thought about that Christmas party, about Kyle's cruel words, my parents' silence, the family's laughter. It still hurt, but differently now. Like an old injury that aches in bad weather. Noticeable, but not debilitating. I thought about what I'd lost. The relationship with my parents would never be what I'd wanted it to be. Kyle and I would probably never speak again. I'd sacrifice the illusion of family unity, the comfort of belonging somewhere, even if that belonging was conditional. But I'd gained something too. Self-respect, financial stability, peace, the knowledge that I could survive on my own, that I didn't need their approval to be worthy of love and care. On the anniversary of that Christmas party, I did something I'd never done before. I threw myself a party. Small, intimate, just my closest friends. Nothing expensive or elaborate. Just good food, good wine, good people who actually cared about me. One friend asked about my family, if I missed them, if I ever thought about reaching out. Sometimes, I admitted, but I think they'd have to want a real relationship, not just my money. And I don't know if they're capable of that. That must be hard, she said. It is. But it's less hard than pretending I mattered to them when I didn't. Later that night, after everyone left, I stood in my clean apartment with its modest furniture and its absence of family photos. My home, my space, my life. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. This is Kyle. Mom gave me your new number. I know it's been a while. I've been thinking about what happened. About what I said. Can we talk? I stared at the message for a long time. Part of me wanted to reply immediately. Part of me wanted to delete it. Part of me wanted to analyze every word, looking for the apology that wasn't quite there. Instead, I set the phone down. I'd answer eventually maybe, or maybe I wouldn't. That was the beauty of boundaries. I got to choose. I'd spent 33 years being invisible unless I was useful. Now I was visible to myself, and that was enough. Some days were hard. Some days I felt the pull of old patterns, the guilt, the what-ifs. Some days I questioned everything I'd done, but most days, I felt free. I wasn't the family bank anymore. I wasn't the forgotten daughter, the responsible one, the invisible child who existed in the margins of other people's lives. I was just me, flawed, learning, growing, building a life on my terms. And if my family ever wanted to be part of that life, really part of it, not just visitors who showed up when they needed something, they knew where to find me. But I wasn't holding my breath. I'd spent enough of my life waiting for love that was never going to come. Now I was learning to give it to myself instead. That was enough. That was more than enough. That was everything. My daughter Lily had just started kindergarten when I got a notification from the class group chat. Hi everyone, I'm Sarah Miller, and my daughter Tiffany just transferred here today. The chat lit up with a string of welcomes and hellos. Just as I was about to type out my own greeting, a huge block of text appeared. Important notice from Tiffany's mom. Girls in the class, please take note. Starting next week, I'll be posting a picture of what my daughter is wearing each day. Please make sure your child doesn't wear the same thing. Also, I request that everyone please switch to the same brand of laundry detergent we use. My daughter has a very sensitive nose and can't tolerate other scents. Finally, my daughter was a C-section baby and is a bit timid. So I ask you to tell your children not to bully her and make sure she's always treated with priority. Wow. I couldn't help but think, this isn't just a new student. This is a royal princess who's slumming it with us commoners. Some of the moms in the chat were quick to push back. Karen's mom. Are you serious? What my kid wears is none of your business. Why should we have to cater to you? Jessica's mom. Exactly. And we're supposed to all use your detergent? My son has allergies too, and we use specific stuff. Yeah. Who made your kid the queen of the class? My kid is special too. The chat quickly devolved into a debate. Usually I just chuckled at the ridiculous things these parents said in the group chat. The class teacher was the administrator, and she'd usually step in to calm things down. I didn't see a problem, so I just muted the chat to get some work done. Then I got a DM. It was from Alyssa, whose daughter Emily was friends with Lily. Hey Sarah, did you get the same message I did? For a moment, I didn't understand. I looked at the screen confused and replied, "What message?" The response came almost instantly, a screenshot of a new message in the group, but this time, not from Sarah Miller, but from Tiffany herself. The girl had used her mother's phone, or maybe her own, to write in the class group. It was a long text, loaded with arrogance, written in the most spoiled way possible. Hi kids, this is Tiffany. I just wanted to say that I'm not like you. I come from a different family, cleaner, more educated, more refined, so don't come near me if you haven't bathed with lavender soap. I also don't like noise, so if your voice is annoying, stay away from me. And if you're poor or ugly, sorry, but we can't be friends. I closed my eyes, took a deep breath. Was this real? A 5-year-old girl writing this kind of thing? I opened the group again. The screenshots were already being shared. The teacher hadn't spoken up yet. The entire group was on fire. And there I was, with my daughter Lily playing with crayons on the living room carpet. Too innocent to know they were turning the school into a social battlefield. It took me a while to react, but when I returned to the group, I saw that Tiffany's mother was online and typing. Everyone, Tiffany was just playing. She has a very fertile imagination. Let's not turn this into something bigger, please. She's just a special child. Special. That word again. And that's when I realized what was really irritating me. It wasn't just that woman's arrogance. It wasn't just the absurd whim of wanting all of us to buy the same laundry detergent or avoid repeating clothes. It was the idea that everything, absolutely everything, revolved around her daughter. As if the other children were extras in a private little theater. I'm not one to get involved. Seriously. In almost a year of the school group, I had never sent more than good morning and birthday congratulations. But at that moment, I couldn't stay quiet. I wrote, calmly, but firmly, Sarah, all children are special. It's not fair or healthy to create an environment where your daughter thinks she has more value than others. And it's not acceptable to write this type of message, or allow her to write, calling classmates ugly or poor. This is bullying. This is early cruelty. If you don't see this, maybe you need to rethink your stance as a mother. The message stayed there for a few seconds. I saw that she viewed it. Silence. Then another mother sent a clapping emoji. Then another, and another. Soon, the message was pinned in the group. And then, a bomb. The teacher sent an audio message. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm aware of what's happening. I just spoke with the coordination. This type of behavior, coming from any child or guardian, is unacceptable. The school values mutual respect. Tiffany's family will be called for an urgent meeting. Meanwhile, I ask everyone to maintain civility in the group. The children's emotional safety comes first. And it was as if a storm had passed. Sarah fell silent. Tiffany, too. For the rest of the week, no outfit of the day photos appeared, no laundry detergent demands, no royal notices. But at the end of that Friday, when I went to pick up Lily from school, she ran to me crying. At the playground, Tiffany had pushed her off the slide and said, "Your mother is a witch. She's going to regret making me sad." My patience ran out right there. I picked up Lily, went straight to the principal's office. I showed the messages, told what happened, asked for action. The principal was very polite but hesitant. She said she understood, but that the school was inclusive, and they couldn't simply remove a student with a sensitive profile. I left there with my blood boiling. And that's when I realized, if no one was going to protect my daughter, I would. And not just protect. I was going to show that woman, and all those who think they can step on ordinary people, that even the quietest mothers know how to make noise when someone touches those they love. This story was just beginning. And if she thought this would end in the school group, she was very wrong. Because I am polite. But I'm not stupid. And whoever messes with my daughter learns the hard way that not every mother is made of sugar. That night, I was silent on the outside, but erupting inside. Lily slept peacefully with bandages on her knees and light breathing, while I stared at my bedroom ceiling with my heart boiling. It wasn't just a fall at the playground. It was what that meant. the symbol of impunity, of neglect, of arrogance. I got my laptop, and I began. I researched everything about this Sarah Miller. It didn't take much. Public social media, active LinkedIn, Instagram profile full of exhibitionist photos of her daughter in designer clothes with captions like, "My princess deserves the best in the world, and the world must adapt to her." And, in the background, the image that caught my attention, the uniform of the company where she worked, a multinational famous for defending diversity and inclusion. So that's what I did. The next morning, I created a new professional profile and sent an email to the company's compliance department, formal, direct, impeccable. "Dear Sir, Madam, I would like to report a situation of extreme gravity involving an employee of your company, Mrs. Sarah Miller, who has been involved in discriminatory and embarrassing conduct within the school environment of preschool-age children. I am attaching screenshots of public and direct messages in parent groups, where your employee demonstrates elitist, abusive, and discriminatory behavior against other children, in addition to allowing her daughter, also a minor, to reproduce such conduct. I understand that the company values social and ethical responsibility, especially in themes like diversity and inclusion. Therefore, I believe that an internal investigation would be coherent given the impact such attitudes can cause to the institution's image." I attached all the screenshots. I sent it. After that, I showered with a calm I hadn't felt for days. At the end of the afternoon, the first consequence emerged. The class group, which had been relatively quiet since the teacher's audio, received a new message from Sarah herself, a long text. But this time, not of arrogance, of panic. "Good afternoon. I ask, please, that you stop persecuting me. Someone sent my messages to the company where I work, and I'm being investigated internally. This has crossed all limits. I am a mother. I'm trying to protect my daughter. I'm not perfect, but I'm being unfairly attacked. Please, stop." The group went silent for a few minutes, until Jessica's mother responded, with the coldness of someone who was tired of being treated as inferior. "You're only reaping what you sowed." And then, as if everyone had been waiting for someone to take the first step, dozens of messages came. "You exposed our daughters. You wanted to control the group as if we were your daughter's employees. You never apologized for anything, not even when your daughter hurt mine. You think money gives you immunity." Sarah left the group. She didn't respond. The next day, when I went to drop off Lily at school, the coordinator called me to talk. She said that after administrative reflections, Tiffany would no longer be attending the school for an indefinite period, that the family chose to transfer her to an institution more aligned with their parenting style. And for the first time, I smiled sincerely. It wasn't pure revenge. It was justice. It was the weight of ego falling from a high heel. But the universe has even more ironic ways of giving back. The following week, I received a call from the father of one of Lily's classmates. He worked at the same company as Sarah. He said that, without naming names, an employee had been placed on disciplinary leave, and that rumors were circulating that she used school groups as a stage to promote intolerance disguised as maternal care. After that, Sarah's Instagram account disappeared. Tiffany's profile was deleted, and the only memory left of the Princess of Perfumed Laundry were the echoes of her bossy tone and the embarrassing silence of a graceless fall. But even so, something still bothered me. Because despite having won the battle, something in me knew. Other mothers like me were still suffering with mini Sarahs in other groups, in other schools, being silenced by fear or shame. And that's when the idea came to me. I started writing an article, a chronicle, a real account, but without names. I published it in a mother's forum, then in another, and another. The story went viral. Thousands of comments. People saying the same thing happened here. Women telling how they were humiliated by elitist mothers, how their children were excluded for not having trendy sneakers or imported lactose-free lunch. I had created something bigger than just revenge. I had created an alert. And that was just the beginning. After my story gained traction in mothers' forums, I started receiving messages from all corners. A woman from Curitiba wrote to me telling how her daughter was excluded from all school activities because she didn't wear ballet flats of the same brand as the other girls. A mother from the interior of Minas reported that her son was called Dirty Thing by a little classmate whose parents demanded that the school prohibit children with inadequate dietary standards. That revolted me. But it also gave me a purpose. I started responding to each message with care, guidance, and mainly listening, because I knew what it was like to feel alone facing an elite disguised as concerned motherhood. A false care that, in reality, was a camouflaged attack. And the worst part? Many of these women only realized the abuse when they were already destroyed. And that's when I realized that my victory over Sarah Miller had opened a breach. I needed to go further. I looked for a friend who worked in a behavior column for a news portal. I told her what had happened, in detail, with all the evidence. She was shocked. She called me for an anonymous interview. I agreed. The article went live 3 days later, with the title, "The Empire of Toxic Motherhood: When Mothers Become Villains of Childhood." It exploded. Comments, shares, emails, local newspaper, TV. In less than a week, I was invited to speak at a discussion circle about school bullying, promoted by the city's own education department. And then suddenly, I, who was just an invisible mother in the kindergarten class group, became a reference for resistance. But that part was beautiful. Now let's go back to the bitter part. A few days after the report, I received an anonymous message. No name, just a photo. It was my daughter Lily, at the school playground, head down, while a woman pointed her finger at her, followed by an audio. "Maybe now you understand what it's like to have a marked daughter. You wanted war? You'll have it. But don't use your daughter as a shield." I couldn't breathe, trembling. That woman, that wretch, was lurking around my daughter's school even after being removed. Not satisfied with being publicly humiliated, she wanted to retaliate in the dirtiest way, using a child. I got in the car and went straight to the school. I demanded to see the camera footage. The coordinator hesitated, but allowed it. And there she was. Sarah, outside, talking to a third-party employee, apparently an acquaintance. She waited for Lily to come out for recess and approached. She didn't touch, but she spoke. Something low. Something that left my daughter standing. Scared, without playing for the rest of recess. I went into shock. How can someone do this to a 5-year-old child? I went straight to the police station. I filed a report. I took the images. I filed for a protective order. The school was notified. The third-party employee fired. But even with all that, something in me said she wasn't going to stop, and neither was I. I had already made noise. I had already exposed. I had already won on several levels. But now it was personal, because one thing is humiliating a mother in a WhatsApp group. Another very different thing is traumatizing a child. My child. I started investigating. I found out Sarah's address, her daughter's new school, her circle of friends, and that's when I discovered she had not only been removed from work, but her husband had filed for divorce. He, amazingly, had also been a target of her arrogance. And with the public exposure, he decided to leave home, taking the older son, who refused to live with his mother. She was now alone, without a job, without marriage, without support. And even so, she still distilled hatred. This only proved to me the type of person she had always been. The difference is that now, without the social veneer, the mask had fallen. So I decided to take the final step. I gathered all the data, all the images, all the testimonies from mothers who, like me, had suffered with her in previous school groups. With legal support, I founded a small informal association, online, called Mothers Against Disguised Abuse. I posted testimonies, I gathered cases, I promoted virtual meetings, and then another bomb exploded. A father from a school where Tiffany had studied before revealed that Sarah had coerced the administration to expel a girl who used a wheelchair because, according to her, she took up too much space and delayed group activities. This story went viral. It appeared in blogs, podcasts, even on a news channel. Sarah became the most hated name of the month. And finally, she disappeared. Her number was deactivated. Her house was put up for sale. Tiffany was removed from school again. We never heard from them again. But the pain she caused, that would take time to pass. My daughter still asked from time to time, why did that lady tell me I was a burden? And I, with my heart in pieces, just said, because there are people who don't know how to love, but mommy knows. And she'll never let anyone do that to you again. And it was true. Never again. Time passed, but the wound remained. Lily went back to playing, went back to smiling, but she wasn't the same. Before, she entered the school courtyard as if it were her world. After the episode with Sarah, she hesitated. She observed. She looked for something with her eyes that only she knew how to identify. It was as if she had learned too early that there are people who smile at you with their mouth and stab you with words. I also changed. I was never the type to seek justice with my own hands. I always believed in what's right, in the process, in reason. But what happened taught us that what's right often needs someone with courage to happen. And I had plenty of courage now. Courage and memory. In one of the meetings of the Mothers Against Disguised Abuse group, a participant shared something that paralyzed me. It was a filed complaint from 3 years ago. Another mother, another school group, another city, but the same name, Sarah Miller. The story was frighteningly similar. Sarah had demanded that all parents make monthly contributions to improve the standard of children's lunches because she thought it was absurd for children of people who buy food wholesale to sit with her daughter. When a mother refused to collaborate, Sarah publicly exposed the woman's daughter's lunch in the school group, calling it inadequate food for child development. The child cried, developed food anxiety, and had to change schools. The complaint was shelved for insufficient evidence, since Sarah threatened to sue everyone who testified against her. But now, with everything we had, everything documented, all the new victims that emerged, the scenario was different. I took this new information to the lawyer who had helped me with the protective order process. He smiled and said, "Now we have a pattern of behavior." And it was based on this that we filed a collective civil lawsuit. The news hit the city like a bomb. For the first time, mothers who had suffered in silence gained a voice. It was no longer a WhatsApp fight. It was a formal action, backed by evidence, by testimonies, by real suffering. I remember sitting in the courthouse waiting room on the day of the preliminary hearing, with some of the mothers beside me, each one with her trauma, with her story, all different from each other, but united by the same oppressor. And then she entered, Sarah, different from the impeccable, self-assured woman who used to post photos of her daughter with crowns and custom dresses. Now she wore wrinkled clothes, hair pulled back carelessly, and a lost look. I almost felt sorry. Almost. But it was enough for her to sit in front of the judge and say, "These mothers are exaggerating. They're jealous. They always were. I just wanted the best for my daughter." And I remembered. My daughter with scraped knees. The anonymous message. The silence at recess. The fear in the eyes of a child who couldn't even write properly, but already understood what it was like to be humiliated. During my testimony, I didn't cry. I didn't tremble. I spoke with the firmness of someone who carries something stronger than resentment inside their chest. A mother's memory. Your Honor, the problem wasn't the laundry detergent, nor the clothes, nor the smell. The problem was the poison with which this woman tried to divide children as if they were pieces on a social chessboard. And when society remains silent in the face of this, it grows. It repeats. It destroys. Not for lack of warning, but for excess of permission. Sarah was sentenced to pay compensation to the families. Little, financially speaking, but enough to be recorded as a public sentence. Enough so that no school would accept her anymore without a history. Enough so that she would have to explain herself every time she tried to start over. But the most important thing, it wasn't the money. It was the warning. To all the Sarahs of the world, you no longer go unpunished. I returned home that day, looked at Lily sleeping with her drawings scattered on the floor and felt that justice, somehow, had been done. And that's when I decided I wasn't going to stop there. I created a channel, small at first, with videos explaining how to identify microaggressions among children, how to notice when a mother is imposing exclusion disguised as concern, how to react, how to report, how to protect yourself. The channel grew. Mothers started commenting, sharing, thanking, and more than that, they started making noise. In schools, in groups, in meetings, fear changed sides. But life has its own cycles. And the following year, while I was participating in a pedagogical meeting at the school, an employee pulled me aside. "Sorry to ask, but you're Lily's mother, right?" "Yes." "Did something happen?" She smiled at me. A tired smile, but sincere. "I wanted to thank you. For everything. I was friends with the employee who was fired, the one who helped Sarah approach your daughter. She told me she regrets it every day, that she didn't know what she was doing, and that after that, she never again closed her eyes to that kind of thing. That caught me by surprise. I wasn't expecting redemption, nor apologies. But there, in the middle of the school hallway, I realized the chain was breaking. One by one, the Sarahs were being disarmed, and every time a mother stood up, others felt safe to do the same. Maybe I didn't win just for myself. Maybe, in the end, it was for all of us. The success of the channel was something that not even in my best daydreams I would have predicted. It started with a few short and direct videos, with themes like how to know if your child is being excluded, phrases that disguise prejudice in school groups, and when an adult's vanity harms a child. Soon came the comments, theme requests, interview invitations. But along with the light comes the shadow. Fake profiles started appearing commenting on the videos. Malicious comments saying I was traumatizing other mothers, that women like me are the reason for weak children, that Tiffany was just a child too educated and refined for the environment she was placed in. These comments always had the same tone: aggressive, defensive, full of venom disguised as superiority. Some came with too much information, as if whoever wrote them knew details that weren't in the public videos. You only had to read 2 lines to realize it was Sarah, or someone very close to her. I ignored the first ones, then blocked the following ones. But when they started mentioning my daughter's full name, threatening to reveal her school, show who she really is, and expose what the militant mother teaches at home, I realized I could no longer let it slide. I went to the police station again. I filed a report for digital stalking and cyberbullying. I presented screenshots, links, evidence that the profiles were fake. The officer this time was more direct. You messed with someone who doesn't know how to lose. Sarah was crumbling and trying to cling to the only power she still thought she had, that of fear. But she didn't know me anymore, because it wasn't just for me anymore, nor for Lily, nor for the other mothers. Now it was for what I had built, for every woman who cried in silence seeing her child being left out, for every father who felt small being treated as inferior for not living in a gated community, for every child who understood too early what it was like to be judged for not being the standard. I continued. I grew. I was called to speak at a state conference on child emotional health. I presented a dossier with the impacts of early social exclusion. I spoke about Tiffany's case without naming names, but leaving the message clear. I received applause, invitations to other lectures. I invited psychologists, pedagogues, and even teachers to participate in channel videos. But it was at one of these meetings that something unexpected happened. A woman approached me at the end of a lecture. She must have been a little over 40, discreet, simple clothes. But her look told me she carried something heavy. "Can I tell you something?" she asked. "Of course," I replied, offering a smile. She took a deep breath, hesitated, then let it all out at once. "I worked as Tiffany's nanny for 2 years, before she moved to your city. I was paralyzed." She continued, "I saw up close what that girl became, not because she was bad, but because she was molded for it. The mother made her repeat phrases of superiority, practice mocking smiles in front of the mirror, as if it were training. She said, 'If you're perfect, the other mothers will feel small. And when they feel small, they do what you want.'" I couldn't respond. I was shocked, nauseated. One day I said that was wrong, that she was teaching cruelty disguised as self-esteem. And you know what she did? She said I was fired, that she didn't want her daughter to have contact with people who think small. I left quietly, afraid, and stayed silent for a long time, until I started seeing you speak, until I realized I wasn't crazy, that this really was abuse, disguised but real. She handed me an envelope, with evidence, photos, messages, copies of notes that Sarah sent with demands to the school, instructions on how Tiffany should be treated, notes about clothes other children wore with observations like, "This girl in pink needs to be excluded." Horrible style. It was a private dossier, from inside her house, and now it was in my hands. I took a deep breath, held back emotion, and said, "You have no idea what this means." "I do," she replied. "It means that now no one will be able to say you exaggerated." With this material, my lawyer initiated a new process, now for collective moral damages and induction of discriminatory child behavior. Heavier, more complete. Now we had the complete picture. A mother who not only allowed cruelty, but taught it. And then came the day I received the sweetest notification of all. Sarah Miller had been formally cited. The judge authorized the start of the process based on compelling evidence. There would be a hearing, there would be investigation, and most likely, there would be definitive judicial conviction. It was on that day that I sat with Lily, now older at 7 years old, and said, "Remember the lady who hurt you with words?" She nodded. "She's going to learn that words have consequences." My daughter smiled. "And you're going to tell other children too, right?" "Always," I replied. "Because no child deserves to be silenced. Not you, not anyone." And she hugged me, tight, like someone who understands that the mother she has isn't just the one who makes afternoon snacks and reads bedtime stories. She's the one who fights for her, who doesn't run away, who doesn't get intimidated, and who, even facing the most made-up threats, knows that no mother needs permission to protect what is most precious to her. The war was far from over. But now, those who trembled were no longer us. The day of the final hearing arrived like one of those gray mornings, when the sky seems to know that something important is about to happen. I wore the best outfit I had, not out of vanity, but because I knew that there, in that room, I represented many other mothers. I took my folder with all the documents, photos, evidence, and took a deep breath before leaving. The courthouse was packed. Some mothers from the group went to support me. Others appeared just to see with their own eyes the woman who, for so long, had intimidated other mothers, educators, and even children. And there she was, Sarah Miller. But this time she wasn't wearing high heels, perfect makeup, or that look of someone who believed she was untouchable. She was dejected. She wore dark, simple clothes, with her hair pulled back carelessly. She sat with the lawyer beside her, but without really looking at him. Her hands trembled slightly. When the judge entered and the session began, the atmosphere became heavy, as if the air had weight. The process was serious. And for the first time, everything she had done was gathered in one place, no longer scattered in loose screenshots or mother group gossip. Now it was official. It had weight. It had consequence. The first to testify was a mother from São Paulo, who told how Sarah had managed to expel her daughter from school for being too disorganized to live with Tiffany. Then, an employee from Tiffany's old school, fired years before, explained how she was coerced into treating the girl as a school celebrity, even receiving daily spreadsheets with instructions that said phrases like, "Make sure my daughter feels more important than the others." Then it was my turn. I stood up, walked to the indicated spot, and looked directly at the judge, not at Sarah. She already knew what I had to say, and deep down she had already heard it. She just didn't want to listen. "Your Honor," I began with a firm voice, "I am here because I don't believe mothers should be silenced by fear, because children shouldn't pay for their parents' vanity, because my 5-year-old daughter was humiliated, excluded, frightened, all because of toxic behavior that started with a simple message in a school group. But this is about something bigger. We are facing a pattern, a repetition of emotional abuse, masked by money and social manipulation. This woman taught her daughter that there are people who are worth more than others. And that value lies in smells, clothes, and status. And when this enters a classroom, Your Honor, it becomes poison. A poison that spreads, that kills self-esteem, that traumatizes even before literacy. I'm not here just for my daughter. I'm here for all the others who couldn't make it here." There was silence. No sound, no cough, no chair dragging. Sarah tried to speak afterward. She tried to justify. She said that everything she did was trying to protect her daughter, that the world is cruel, and that she wasn't understood. But her voice had no strength. She was defeated, not by words, but by her own actions, which returned like an echo in the form of justice. The judge was clear. He sentenced Sarah to pay compensation to the families involved, ordered the publication of the sentence in an official channel of the district, and determined that she participate mandatorily in a parental re-education program. More than that, he publicly recognized that the damages caused were not accidental. They were constructed, repeated, predicted. When I left the courthouse, the sky was already opening. Light touched the street, as if the world outside was different from what we left inside. And in a way, it was. My daughter was waiting for me in the car, playing with a coloring book she loved. When she saw me, she smiled in that innocent, pure way that only children know how to offer. I got in the car and held her little hand. "Done, my love," I said, with a choked voice. Mommy did what she promised. She looked at me confused but smiled. She didn't need to understand the details. She just knew she was safe, and that was enough. In the days that followed, the repercussion was great. The sentence became a reference in seminars. Emails arrived from mothers across the country saying they now knew they could fight, that it wasn't an exaggeration to demand respect. Lily's school principal called me to thank me. She said the school also learned that now teachers were more attentive, more trained, more human, and gradually I returned to ordinary life. But I was never the same again. Over time, Lily healed completely. She went back to running, playing, laughing freely. She never looked back when I dropped her off at the school door. She never asked me again why that lady said she was a burden. And as for Sarah, I learned through acquaintances that she moved to another city. She tried to start over somewhere else. But with the internet, with records, with the mark of what she left, she was no longer invisible. She was known and remembered, not with hatred, but with alertness. And Tiffany? We never saw her again. Part of me hopes that away from that suffocating mother, she has a chance to learn what empathy is, to learn that the world doesn't revolve around an imaginary crown, and that real princesses don't humiliate. they embrace. Today, I continue with my channel, with my work, with my daughter, with my voice. Because what I learned in this story is that mothers, when united, are the most powerful force in the world, that silence protects the oppressor, and that none of us is alone. This story was mine, but it could be yours.